Hello everyone, welcome to another session of Elixir with me. If you're new to the channel, my name is Tracy Pendo Onim and I'm a software developer programming with Elixir for 5 years now. In our previous video, we looked at the module-based supervisor and we were also able to set up one for ourselves. With the supervisor module kind of setup, we had to predefine the list of static children that are to be started when the supervisor starts. What if you want to start a child process later on, but not immediately when the supervisor is started? What if you add a child to the main application supervisor and that process ends up running idle, consuming memory unnecessarily? What if you are handling a dynamic processing such as processing transaction during checkout, where the number of child processes that are to be created depends on the users performing the checkout? This is where the dynamic comes in handy to answer those what ifs. Why would you want to use a dynamic supervisor? A dynamic supervisor is started without any children predefined. Therefore, with dynamic supervisor, there is low chances of having idle processes running that will consume the memory. With a dynamic supervisor, children are started on demand, that is, when they are needed. Not having to predefine the children to be started under the supervisor, with the dynamic supervisor, it means that you can start those children dynamically. That said, let's see how a dynamic supervisor works. We shall go through a basic example of a dynamic supervisor. Let's follow this documentation to define our dynamic supervisor. So I want to add a dynamic supervisor under the children of the main application supervisor. So the first thing, let's copy this. Let's add it here on the Gen demo application. So this is the main application supervisor. I will pass this under as a child of the main supervisor. Okay, cursor is there to save the day. What else is missing? So I need to also change that. Okay, I'm having an error I could not figure out. So this is comma, then what else? Okay, so I have defined that. Okay, so the error is gone. So this is our dynamic supervisor. So I've passed this dynamic supervisor, the name of the dynamic supervisor, which is Gen demo dynamic supervisor, and the strategy 1-for-1. So the strategy means if one child process is affected, it's only that child that will be restarted. So dynamic supervisor only supports 1-for-1 strategy. Here we are told once the dynamic supervisor is running, we can use it to start children on demand. So let's start our dynamic supervisor by first spinning up the main application. We shall do that using the ix-smix command. Then let's confirm that the dynamic supervisor is actually running. We can use the supervisor.whichChildren function, which takes in the name, the registered name of the main supervisor. So the registered name is Gen demo supervisor. So here you could see that we have the Gen demo dynamic supervisor and this is its PID. You can also confirm if it's actually alive. So I will use the PID kernel function to get access of the PID because I cannot use it in this format. So that's why I have to redefine it. Okay, so we have the PID. Let's use the process.alive function, pass it the PID of the dynamic supervisor, and it's truly alive. Let's go ahead and start a child process under the dynamic supervisor using the start child function of RT2. We shall use an existing Gen server that was initially defined, that is the customer tracker server. So this is the child that will be started under the dynamic supervisor. We shall use this function. Let's see how it works. It takes in the supervisor and the child specification. If we look at the documentation example, so this is the name of the registered supervisor. In our example, we are going to use the Gen demo dynamic supervisor. Then this is the child specification, which includes the child that is to be started. So here a tuple of a counter and a number 0 has been passed. So counter here means this is the gen server that has been defined. Gen server defined here is called counter. Then 0, this is the initial argument that will be passed when the gen server startling function is called. Let's go ahead and define ours and start our dynamic supervisor. So we have the ix-is mix command. So I am restarting the interactive shell. Then we have the dynamic supervisor. We are calling the start child function, which is going to start our customer tracker. Pass it the gendemo.dynamicSupervisor. Then pass the child specification here. So remember, the child specification has different format. You can pass it as a module, you can pass it as a map, or you can pass it as a tuple. Since I'm not passing any arguments, that will be going to be passed to the startling function when it has been started. I'll just pass it as a module. So I'll copy that. Then let's start. This is the PID of the customer tracker server. To verify, you can also call the dynamic.waitChildren function just to verify if the PID matches or if the PID is that of a child process. So you could see the worker that has been started under the dynamic supervisor is the customer tracker server. From there, you can interact with the gen server process which has been started on demand using the dynamic supervisor. For example, we have the PID. Okay, let me just redefine this. Usually it's best to pattern match if you want to get hold of the PID. 350. Okay, so that's the PID of the customer tracker. We have some of the custom function that was defined here. So we have already started. Let's say we want to add a customer. To add a customer, we pass in the request as a tuple. I had this function here to raise an intentional error. I need to close this. Let's see if I can recompile and fix it up. Okay, let's add a customer here. So add customer. I'll call this function customer tracker. Add or remove customer, pass it the PID, then pass it the request. So the request is add customer and the number of customers that you want to pass. So that is add customers. Let's say we're adding 3 customers. Key error, customers not found. Yeah, and I have an error already. Good. The gen server process, our customer tracker server has been started with initial state of an empty list. So that's why it's raising a key error suggesting that the key customer is not found in an empty list. How has this happened? Remember how we have start our child process? When calling the dynamic supervisor startling function, we have passed the registered name of our dynamic supervisor, and we have passed the module name of the customer tracker server. So with that, by default, it's going to take an empty list as the initial argument. So let's change that. If we want, you can always tell the dynamic supervisor how to start your child process using the start option, but we're not going to go through that route at the moment. Okay, so let's restart the customer tracker. So I'm going to call the startling function again. I'm sure that this process is not alive at the moment, so we'll have to restart it, but let's confirm. Yeah, it's not alive, so let's restart it. Each time I want to clear this with the VS Code, I used the command K option, but now here it's Control L. I have to keep reminding myself this. Okay, so let's clear. Okay, not clearing again. So I'll use clear. We have to restart our customer tracker under the dynamic supervisor. I want to pattern match this with an OK PID so that we don't have to use the PID kernel each time we want to access the PID. We already know that this function returns an OK, a tuple of an OK PID, and the PID here is the PID of the child process that is started under the dynamic supervisor. Also, I'm going to define the child specification using a tuple and now pass the initial argument. I'll copy this because when we call the startling function, we wanted this to be the default. argument, which is the initial state. I'll start that. We have already started our customer tracker server. Now let's interact with it. Let's add or remove customer tracker. We have a customer tracker and we're going to add or remove. Pass it the PID and the request, that is a tuple of add customers and the number of customers to be added. Let's pass 3. And now it has worked. Do we say hooray? Okay, let's get the number of customers. That is the PID. And the request, I have to check which request is being handled when getting the number of customers. Do I have? Yeah, so get customer number. Hooray. We have current customers number is 3 and the time that they were added is this. That's a win. How do you celebrate your wins? Because this is a good feeling when everything gets to work. That is a basic example of how Dynamic Supervisor works. In this case, we have used an inbuilt Dynamic Supervisor. Similar to the module-based supervisor, you can also define your own Dynamic Supervisor. So I will share the link to the documentation so that you can explore more on it. Dynamic Supervisor comes in handy when you want to start the child processes on demand. Let's say you are handling a payment system and you want to start a process for each transaction that comes in. In this case, the Dynamic Supervisor will be a better option for dynamically starting these processes. However, it can also be dangerous to your application if you are not careful. Remember, each process that is being started is consuming a memory. And if you're dynamically starting a process for each transaction, that means more memory will be required. So if you're not careful, this might have an impact on your application performance. How do you handle a case like this? In a real case scenario, most of the time, this process gets to be terminated once they complete the job, so that you don't have an idle process that is running and consuming the memory unnecessarily. Like our customer tracker, we can stop the gen server once it has completed its job. That's it for this video. If you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to follow for more Elixir tutorials. Until next time, thank you for watching.